Hey there, folks! Have you ever wondered why some states in the US are so dang empty? Where are all the people? Well, today we're going to dive into the top 10 emptiest states and figure out why they've got more tumbleweeds than people. First off, let's talk about population density. It's basically the number of people crammed into a square mile. But why is that? Well, a bunch of things can make a state less appealing to live in, like crazy weather, tough terrain, not enough jobs, and a serious lack of cool stuff to do. All right, let's count down the top 10 emptiest states and see what's keeping people away. Let's kick things off with the emptiest state in the US, Wyoming. Sure, it's got Yellowstone and the Grand Tetons, but that's not enough to convince most people to live there. The winters are brutal, with temperatures dropping to teeth-chattering lows and snow piling up like nobody's business. And the terrain? Let's just say it's not for the faint of heart. We're talking rugged mountains, vast prairies, and a whole lot of wide open spaces. But what really keeps people away from Wyoming? The lack of job opportunities. Unless you're into ranching, mining, or tourism, there's not a whole lot of ways to make a living out here. I mean, there's only so many cattle you can wrangle, you know? Plus, with so few people around, it can get pretty dang lonely. I guess that's why the sheep outnumber the humans. Next up, we've got Alaska, the biggest state in the country with the fewest people. And let me tell you, there are some pretty good reasons why. For starters, most of the state is either frozen tundra or rugged mountains. We're talking about a place where the winters are so long and dark, you might forget what the sun looks like. And the summers? Well, let's just say the mosquitoes are big enough to carry you away. But it's not just the harsh environment that keeps people away from Alaska. The economy is mostly about oil, fishing, and tourism, which doesn't require a ton of people. And with so much land and so few folks, it can be tough to find a date for Friday night. I mean, your nearest neighbor might be a polar bear. In third place, we've got South Dakota, a state that's a lot like its northern neighbor, with lots of empty space and not a whole lot of people. Sure, they've got Mount Rushmore, but that's not exactly a bustling metropolis. Nope, most folks in South Dakota are spread out on farms and ranches, where the closest thing to excitement is watching the grass grow. And why is that? Well, the weather's not exactly a walk in the park. We're talking scorching summers and winters so cold, you might as well be living in a freezer. Plus, the economy's mostly about agriculture and tourism, which isn't exactly a recipe for big cities. I guess that's why most people just pass through on their way to somewhere else. Coming in at number 4, we've got North Dakota, a state that's got more prairie than people. And let me tell you, there's a reason for that. The winters here are so cold, you'd think you were in Antarctica. We're talking about temperatures that dip way below zero and wind chills that'll freeze your nose hairs. And the summers? Well, let's just say it's not exactly a tropical paradise. But it's not just the weather that keeps people away from North Dakota. The economy's mostly about farming and oil, which isn't exactly a magnet for city slickers. And with so much wide open space, it can be tough to find someone to talk to. I mean, your best friend might end up being a tumbleweed. Halfway through our list, we've got Montana, a state that's basically one big postcard. With its mountains, forests, and prairies, it's no wonder they call it Big Sky Country. But all that beauty comes at a price. It's dang hard to live there. The winters are so brutal, you might as well be living in a snow globe. And the summers? Well, let's just say the wildfires can get pretty intense. But it's not just the weather that makes Montana a tough place to call home. The economy's mostly about farming, mining, and tourism, which doesn't exactly bring in the big bucks. And with so few people around, it can be hard to find someone to split a beer with. I guess that's why most folks just admire Montana from afar. Next on our list is Nebraska, a state that's smack dab in the middle of the Great Plains. And let me tell you, there's a whole lot of nothing out there. Most people are clustered in a few cities like Omaha and Lincoln, while the rest of the state is pretty much just farmland. I mean, unless you're really into corn, there's not a whole lot to do. And why is that? Well, the weather's not exactly a walk in the park. We're talking scorching summers and winters so cold, you might as well be living in a meat locker. Plus, the economy's mostly about agriculture, which isn't exactly a magnet for young folks looking for a good time. I guess that's why most people just drive through Nebraska on their way to somewhere else. In 7th place, we've got Oregon, a state that's got a serious case of the empties. And it's all thanks to the Cascade Range and all those dang trees. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's beautiful and all, but it's not exactly easy to set up shop in the middle of a forest. That's why most Oregonians stick to the cities like Portland and Eugene. But even in the cities, Oregon's got its challenges. The weather's kind of a mixed bag, with rainy winters and summers that can't quite make up their mind. And the economy? Well, it's mostly about forestry, manufacturing and high tech, which isn't exactly everyone's cup of tea. Plus, with all those hipsters running around, it can be tough to find a cheap place to live. Coming in at number 8, we've got Idaho, a state that's got mountains, forests, and deserts for days. And let me tell you, that's a recipe for some serious elbow room. Most folks in Idaho are spread out in small towns, where the biggest excitement is the annual potato festival. I mean, unless you're really into skiing or fly fishing, there's not a whole lot to do. And why is that? Well, Idaho's economy is mostly about farming, mining, and tourism, which isn't exactly a magnet for big city types. Plus, the terrain's pretty dang rugged, which makes it tough to get around. I guess that's why most people just admire Idaho's beauty from a distance. Next up, we've got Colorado, a state that's got some seriously stunning views. I mean, have you seen the Rocky Mountains? They're like something out of a postcard. But here's the thing. Those mountains make a huge chunk of the state pretty dang hard to live in. That's why most people stick to cities like Denver and Colorado Springs. But even in the cities, Colorado's got its challenges. The cost of living's pretty high, thanks to all those fancy ski resorts and tech startups. And the weather? Well, let's just say it's not exactly consistent. One minute it's sunny and warm, and the next it's snowing like crazy. I guess that's why most people just visit Colorado for vacation. And finally, we've got Nevada, a state that's pretty much one big desert. And let me tell you, that Great Basin ain't exactly a cozy place to call home. Most folks are packed into Las Vegas and Reno, where they can gamble and party all night long. But outside those cities, it's a whole lot of nothing. And why is that? Well, the weather's not exactly a walk in the park. We're talking scorching summers and winters that can get pretty dang cold. Plus, the economy's mostly about tourism and gambling, which isn't exactly a recipe for stable jobs. I guess that's why most people just visit Nevada for a wild weekend. So there you have it, folks. The top 10 emptiest states and why they're not exactly crowded. But hey, maybe that's not such a bad thing. After all, sometimes it's nice to have a little peace and quiet, even if it means dealing with crazy weather and not a whole lot to do. At the end of the day, these states might not be for everyone, but they sure do have their own unique charm. And who knows, maybe one day people will flock to these wide open spaces for a taste of the simple life. But until then, I guess the tumbleweeds will just keep on rolling.